You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Folks, I want to welcome back to the program. We've got Phil Kerpen, who's the president of American Commitment and a great patriot in his own right. Phil, it's great to have you back in the program, and it's actually a pleasure because living here in New Jersey and having watched this whole entire special Senate race unfold, you've got some great information with us for us on the two candidates and their performance in previous offices and what we may expect if either one of them is elected. So again, Phil, welcome to the Final Say Radio Show.
Hey, great to be with you.
So let's start with Cory Booker first, if we can, Phil. He's the mayor of Newark, and, well, Newark is they're adding a lot of jobs, aren't they? And they're not spending too much money on their education for poor performance, right?
Well, under Cory Booker, when he came into office, the unemployment rate in May of 2006, when he took over for Sharp James, the unemployment rate was 8.5%, and that's way too high. That's an outrage. I think anyone would be outraged by 8.5% unemployment. As of today, the most recent monthly data that came out, which is for July of this year in the city of Newark, is 14.2%. So he's dramatically increased unemployment in his 7 years on the job there in the city of Newark. And in fact, this is the fifth year in a row under Cory Booker that the unemployment rate in Newark is above 14%. And as you know, they play all kinds of games with these official unemployment numbers. The same as the national rate, they say it's 7.5. It's really more like 14. You know, the Newark rate, they say it's 14. It's really more like 30 if you look at the people who've given up looking for work and so on and so forth. And so it is an absolute catastrophe in the city of Newark. Violent crime has spiked more than 24% since Cory Booker laid off hundreds of cops a couple of years ago. Through attrition and those layoffs, they're down about 300 police officers under Cory Booker, and maybe more. They're not releasing the current number of full-time officers, and some folks there think it's even more than the 300, that they've reduced the force of police officers. They recently, thankfully, just ended a few days ago, but they had been on a streak of 10 murders in 10 days in the city of Newark, and of course Booker was off campaigning and not doing anything about it, and not admitting that his police layoffs have really been devastating and they need to be reversed. And so he's got a really outrageously bad record of failure there in the city of Newark. All he ever does is say how much better he made it, but on every single measurable statistic, Newark is worse off now than it was under Sharp James, and that is absolutely tragic.
No, it's amazing. And Phil, I don't know if I ever told you this, but our father was actually born in Newark, and Newark was such a different place back then that it's hard to believe what it became over all these decades. And with the amount of money that is spent within Newark, not just on these other social things such as the police and fire, but within the education, I believe we're spending roughly around $24,000 per student in Newark, as opposed to anywhere from about $10,000 to $14,000 in most other for students in most other towns in New Jersey. Am I pretty close to those numbers?
It's a little over 23. You got that right. It's a little bit over $23,000 per pupil spending in Newark. It's, I think, $23,000 and 100, or $23,000 and change, and more than 80% of that comes from state income taxes. And so the vast majority of this money is coming from suburban taxpayers all over the state. It's pouring into Newark. They're spending over $23,000 per student, and the absolutely tragic thing about that is the whole rest of the state is getting jacked on their income taxes to pay for this exorbitant, gold-plated, priced education in Newark, but they're not getting a gold-plated education in the classroom. Somehow that money disappears somewhere along the way, and by the time it gets to the classroom, they're actually in very, very bad shape. They don't have resources. They got ancient books and ancient desks, and you have to wonder where the heck the $23,000 per pupil goes, because it doesn't show up in the classroom, and quite frankly, it doesn't show up in the results, which is the real tragedy. Now, the past few years, under Governor Christie in particular, because it is mostly a state-run school district. Last couple of years, they've got a little more local autonomy now just recently, but the last couple of years, the graduation rates have come up significantly. They were down in the 20s and 30s, and part of it is that they switched the test to a much easier test, and so there's a little bit of gamesmanship here, but they're now claiming a graduation rate of about 68%, and they're touting this as like a grand achievement, that they're slightly over two-thirds now are graduating in Newark. First of all, that's not much of an achievement. When a third of the kids almost are still failing to graduate from high school, that's a real problem. But second, 90% of the graduates, the ones that have said graduated, you passed, 90% of the graduates who go on to Essex County Community need remedial English. And so 90% of the so-called high school graduates can't read very well. And so, I think they're increasing the graduation rate primarily by diminishing the standards that are required for that, and the schools are still as bad as ever despite all that money that's pouring in from the rest of the state.
And to your comment on the amount of money, and I'll tell you, in my town, we're spending nearly half what Newark is per student, and all of our schools are nice looking. They're well maintained. The teachers are well paid. So I agree with you. I have no idea where the money could possibly be going. It doesn't make any sense. And with regards to the performance of students coming out of Newark schools once they go on to community college or otherwise is abysmal. And the problem is, Phil, we're failing these students, and we're setting them up for failure in college and in whatever future they may have, depending on what they choose to do to work-wise. And that's a shame.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And ordinarily I would say you can't blame the mayor, who has zero statutory authority over the schools in the city of Newark. You would say, well, you really can't blame the mayor for that. But in this particular case, we've got a mayor who said he would fix the schools. He promised that he would fix the schools. He said, I'm going to use it with outside money from Mark Zuckerberg and these other big donors and his hedge fund friends. And he said, I'm going to, set an example, and I'm going to fix the schools, and I'm going to turn it around. And so he made all these grandiose promises, and he's really failed to deliver on that. In particular, the Zuckerberg gift, and we have a video about this up at bookerfail.com. It's called A Record of Failure. You can click onto that, and if you go to the education tab, it comes up as well. The Zuckerberg money, first of all, they tried to keep it completely secret where the money was going. They refused to tell the public where the money was going. They got sued by the ACLU over that. And last year, they finally complied with a court order and released the documents on Christmas Eve when they thought nobody would notice. And frankly, not a lot of people did. And those internal documents showed that they never intended to spend a penny of that money in the classrooms. And so, even, the vast majority of the money, the $23,000 per pupil, really the mayor can't do much about that. But he said if he raised this outside money, he'd be able to make a big difference. And quite frankly, the fact that he tried to keep secret that none of this money was going into the classroom, I think, ought to be another huge scandal.
It's certainly not transparent, Phil. Now, Phil, if we could, for a few minutes, these two gentlemen are running for the office of Senate. And now you've got two types of issues. You've got domestic issues, and then you've got what we see unfolding now with regards to foreign policy. And I think, obviously, when you look at something like what's going on in Syria, the ensuing nuclear program in Iran, other threats within the region and other regions, could you tell us a little bit about the two candidates here and who you may think is a little bit better, or some things that you could point out which maybe we should be looking at with regards to domestic and foreign policy?
Well, certainly. Look, I think the biggest issue right now that the country's dealing with is the Syria issue, and I think that the differing responses to this by the two different candidates tell you a lot about what you're going to get based on who you vote for. And Steve Lonegan, even the day before Obama made his announcement that we were considering military force, Steve Lonegan did a huge press conference. He had 100 Syrian Christians behind him, did it at a Syrian church, and he said he was absolutely unequivocally opposed to the use of military force. Now, I happen to personally agree with that. You might disagree, but wherever you are on the issue, he took a clear, forceful stand in a very powerful public way, and he has not wavered from it in any way. And I think that tells you a lot about the kind of guy he is and the way that he approaches these big issues. He figures out what he thinks is right, and then he doesn't waver from it. And that's a huge contrast with Cory Booker, who's had 4 different positions on Syria in the past 2 weeks. He initially came out in an interview with the Huffington Post. He said, I'm totally opposed to the use of force in Syria. I'm anti-war. I would never support a war. Then a few days later, he did a 180, and he told BuzzFeed that if Obama wants to go to war, he must have a good reason, so I support him. He has more information than I do. I would support the war. Then a couple of days after that, he told Politicker, I can't consider this right now. This isn't the time to think about Syria. So he went to this sort of, this dodge sort of waffle position. And then yesterday, he took the position, I think this was in Politicker as well, he said that he's now anti-war again. He's against the war in Syria, but he reserves the right to change his mind based on Obama's speech tonight. And so this guy has gone literally, this is even worse than John Kerry, literally this guy has gone from, he was against it before he was for it, before he was against it, but he reserves the right to change his mind after the Obama speech. So, you're going to get a guy who agree with him or disagree, and as I said, I happen to agree on this particular issue, but you can have a guy like Steve Lonegan who's going to figure out what he thinks is right and not waver from it, take a leadership position and take a strong stance, or you can have a guy who's going to put his finger in the wind, look left, look right, try to figure out, which flip-flop is the best one for that given day of the week. And at the end of the day, I believe he's going to end up doing whatever President Obama wants him to do. And so I think you're going to have to decide as voters in New Jersey whether you want someone who's going to be a strong voice for what he thinks is right, or somebody who's going to be all over the map, but at the end of the day usually just be a rubber stamp for Obama.
I think it's well said. Phil, look, you just made some great salient points about these guys from a leadership perspective. And clearly, from everything I've seen, Cory Booker looks to be the next poster child for Redistribution USA. What I'm curious from your perspective is, when you look at the money behind these campaigns, and since money is required to win campaigns like this is so big, and of course where the money comes from tells us a lot about who these people will be beholden to, from the perspective of money, what do you think we can expect by a win from either Booker or Lonegan?
Look, Booker has a massive cash advantage. I mean, every hedge fund in New York is supporting him. There was even one hedge fund guy, Abe Eisenstadt from the Bronx, who gave Booker a personal gift in 2012. It was on his local ethics disclosure. I'm wondering why the media hasn't asked about that. But this guy's been raising all kinds of cash from Silicon Valley, from Hollywood. About 80% of his money's from out of state. Booker's probably going to have, $15 or $20 million all told. So, I mean, he's going to have be sort of a juggernaut. Every big money interest wants him in there because he's going to deliver for them, because he's going to be, he's going to give them the big contracts and the big special deals and all the rest of it. It's exactly what he did in Newark. This guy runs around bragging about how I have a third of new economic development in the state. That's because he has 43% of the corporate welfare from the Urban Transit Hub program. So all those buildings that he's bragging about, you paid for those with your taxpayers. That all came from suburban taxpayers. And so he's the go-to for the big developers, for the Silicon Valley guys, for Wall Street. He's the one who's going to fill their pockets with taxpayer dollars and special deals. Steve Lonegan, it's a grassroots campaign. He doesn't have the big money backing. He has not raised a lot of money. Frankly, I'm doing this outside effort with BookerFail.com. We've not raised a lot of money either. And so if you're interested in this race, it's crucial that you kick in some dollars, and if you like the stuff we have on that Booker Fail website, click on that donate button. I don't think we've got to match the $20 million that Booker's going to have with himself and the outside group supporting him, but we need to get a few $1 million to at least get the facts out there in order to win this race.
What really gets me, Phil, with this type of election is that you've heard for so many years now the rhetoric against the 1%. When you look at these campaigns, it's the 1% who's funding a large part of these campaigns. And it's almost like these people, they don't mind if they're being used, for the political talking points, because they know at the end of the day they're going to get, as you said, some sort of something some bang for their buck, if you will. And I think it's sad.
Yeah, look, I mean, This is the crazy thing about the way the Democrats bash rich people and pretend that rich people all back Republicans. You know, at the end of the day, and I think you see this more than anywhere in this race in New Jersey right now, the richest of the rich would much rather support someone who's willing to, send tax dollars their way or give them preferential treatment or the rest of it than somebody who's a real free market guy. Because a real free market guy is about having an equal playing field where small business has a shot and where the big guys don't have locked-in advantages. And that's why I think, despite all the rhetoric and all the all the Occupy and all the rest of this stuff, at the end of the day, most of the big money, the Wall Street, the Silicon Valley, the Hollywood, they go for a guy like Booker, the guy who's going to cut the deal with them, not the free market guy like Lonegan, who's really going to be more focused on a level playing field for small business.
Yeah, that's a good point. I also think, and I appreciate for many years now, that Steve Lonegan has done such a good job of addressing the tax issues and other economic issues. So it's not like he's just doing this recently because he's running for office. This is something that he's been focused on and doing for a long time, and we know where he stands. Do we have any idea, outside of being a rubber stamp, where Cory Booker stands in areas of economics and tax?
Well, I think you have to look at the record in Newark, and I've gone through some of this already, but small businesses in Newark this year, they got their appraisals redone, and many of them had a doubling or a tripling of their land values. They are getting absolutely hammered by taxes at the same time that he's giving out all these tax abatements for these huge downtown developments to the politically connected developers and so on. And so I think, if you sort of extrapolate that to the federal level, and I think you have to, this is going to be a guy who's willing to raise your taxes and my taxes and the whole country's taxes to have more money to give out to special interests and crony deals and the rest of it. And he's already promised to do that. He said he would support a cap and trade or a carbon tax, which, as you know, would be economically devastating. He said he wants to raise the death tax, which I think is the most immoral tax, in the entire Internal Revenue Code. And so this is somebody who wants to raise taxes for the little guy, for me and you and for everyone else, to cut his deals, to do not just to do more redistribution welfare type programs for the poor, but to do these really corrupt corporate welfare programs for the richest of the rich and the politically well connected and his donors from Wall Street and Silicon Valley and so on. And so I think you really have to look at the records. And you look at Steve Lonegan, 12 years as mayor in Bogota, taxes were absolutely flat, and spending was flat. It was basically the same level 12 years later, which is unbelievable. You never see that. I mean, he was limited to the rate of inflation over 12 years. You never see a record like that ever. And it's just a very stark contrast with what you've seen in New Jersey, where you got a guy like Cory Booker. When he fired 167 police officers in 2010, taxes were up 20% that year. So he's got a lot more money coming in, and he says, I'm going to find a bunch of things to waste it on, and I'm going to fire police officers, the most important function that local government has. Somebody who takes that kind of view, you bring that to the federal level, he's going to be cutting the military to fund more welfare at the same time he's raising taxes. I mean, you look at his federal policy positions, they're an exact mirror of what he did in Newark, and frankly, he has imperiled public safety in Newark. The crime right now is the worst that it's ever been. The violent crime, as I said, is higher right now than it was the last year of Sharp James, and that says a lot.
Yeah, I still think about those young kids in the schoolyard who were executed and in Newark, and it was such a tragic thing that you would think that we would be adding to the police force and as a community working to never see that happen again. And you just pointed out several times just in this interview that Cory Booker has done the exact opposite, and it's very sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's really twisted priorities. And, that I think, whatever level of government you're talking about, protecting the public, the safety of your constituents has always got to be the number one priority. That is the principal reason that government exists in the first place. And, if you as a mayor make the police force such a low priority that you're slashing it and you're not able to protect people, to me, it's very scary to think about what's going to happen if you're at the national level making decisions for the whole country.
Well, Phil, John and I are going to do our part. We're going to contact Steve Lonegan's campaign, and we're going to get a hold of some literature, and we're going to physically knock on as many doors as we can in our communities to try to get people to not only come out and vote, but to come out and support Steve Lonegan for senator in New Jersey.
Well, that's terrific, and I would just remind you, this is a Wednesday election. It is Wednesday, October 16th. So this is one where if conservatives are organized and turn out in big numbers, they could steal this. I don't care what the pundits and polls say. Nobody knows how to model the turnout for a Wednesday, October election.
Okay, so first, where could people go to follow you? And then if you can provide some information of where people can find out more about the Steve Lonegan campaign or anything else they should be looking at, please, Phil, go ahead and share everything you want.
Well, our website is bookerfail.com. That's Booker, FAIL.com, and you can see all our videos, all our posts. There's an issues tab on the left, and you can see specifically about education or crime or the economy. I've got just a ton of information on that site. Everything you ever wanted to know about Cory Booker that the media has been covering up is on that site, as well as that donate button I mentioned. If you want to help my outside effort in this race, you can do it that way. I don't know Steve's website off the top of my head, but if you type in Lonegan in Google, I'm sure it'll come up. It's Lonegan.
Okay. And, of course, you can go to AmericanCommitment.org and check out all the other stuff there. Well, Phil, it's been great having you. I hope you had a really nice summer, and I know you guys are back to business there in Washington, D.C., with the members of Congress starting to come back.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of months here with Obamacare and deficit deal and all this other stuff going on. I'm hoping we can make some progress on these issues. So I'm going to be working hard on that on the C4 side, American Commitment. The stuff that I'm doing in this New Jersey race is through a different legal entity. It's the American Commitment Action Fund, and that's the super PAC that's running Booker Fail.
Okay, sounds good. Again, Phil Kerpen, thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
All right, have a good one, guys.
All right, take it easy.